To this, our first Nipmuc Regional High School digital conversation. My name is John Clements. I'm one of the co-principals here at Nipmuc Regional, and I'm so thankful that there are people in the room with us for this, our inaugural digital conversation. As I look around the room here, we have students who are participating. Thank you, students, for being here. We have parents, we have community members, and in addition, a number of the folks who are here are administrators in other districts. So we have a number of educators who are bringing their experience not only as parents, but as leaders of other schools. We're thrilled to have you here. Nipmuc Regional, as you know, is a one-to-one school, and we're committed to finding ways to communicate, collaborate, and innovate. And hopefully tonight is a way to meet you in the comfort of your own home and continue what we think is the most important conversation we have every day in our schools. And that's how do we reimagine our work? How do we make school places that inspire? How do we make our schools places that are homes of agency and deep inquiry and real work that matters? And so we have a conversation scheduled for about the next 30, 45 minutes or so. And we're looking forward to getting everyone involved in the conversation and sharing their thoughts about this. I'm gonna hand it over to Mrs. Moran before we introduce our special guest for the night.
Great, so I'm Marianne Moran. I'm the school principal here at Nipmuc Regional High School, and we're thrilled to have everyone here to start this conversation. So Nipmuc Regional, as well as Mendon Upton, has been kind of on a journey over the past year. And we've taken a lot of opportunities to engage in work and explore some ideas around modern learning, which has helped us create a more aspirational vision for school and learning that moves beyond some of the traditional definitions of success and what school looks like. Some of the work that we've engaged in as a community, and when I talk about school communities, I talk about our students, I talk about our educators and staff, but I also talk about our community members, our parents, our professionals, other educators living within our community. So we've called them all to the table. And some of the work that's come out of the past year include creating a call to action. So why are we doing this work? Why are we talking about redesigning school? And why now? Why is now a critical time? We've talked a lot about our beliefs about learning as a school community. And when we talk about learning, we don't talk just about learning in a classroom setting, because we really feel that learning in school should mirror what learning looks like outside of school. So we spent a lot of time asking people about how they learn most powerfully and deeply. And then we've talked about our definition of learning. In our role as educators in a school community, I think there should be a common definition about learning. So not just what is learning, but also who are our learners, where does learning take place, when does learning take place, and how does learning take place? And now that we have these guiding documents in place, it's really kind of our school community's opportunity to dig in and figure out what's next and begin this redesign process to create this more aspirational mission. At the same time this work has been happening at Nipmuc, it's also been happening at a district level. So last spring we engaged in a strategic planning process at the district level, and out of that came our new strategic plan called Inspire, which has a set of beliefs, our portrait of the graduate, but also our mission, which is to empower all learners to thrive. So we're going to dig into that a little bit tonight as well.
We're joined tonight by two really, and I'm not overselling this, two world-renowned educational leaders and people who have had a really personal and deep impact on the work that we've done here at Nipmuc Regional. We're joined by Bruce Dixon and Will Richardson, who are the co-founders of Modern Learners. Bruce has spent the majority of his career working with governments in order to help them scale the use of technology in the educational sector. Beyond that, he's one of the pioneers and the leaders of the one-to-one technology movement, trailblazing what it means to bring technology into schools, and not just as a replacement for the work that we always do, but ways to inspire kids to do new, different, amazing things through the support and enhancements of technology. Will Richardson is a world-renowned author and speaker and blogger, and probably self-described disruptor, someone who has challenged our thinking repeatedly. Marianne and I, as well as the entire MERSDA team, has had the chance to work with both Bruce and Will through a program called Change School, where we went through an 8-week intensive course with a lot of face-to-face digital conversations using Zoom. And as lifetime members of Change School, we are on screen with them often, sharing ideas, testing new thoughts, and getting feedback from them. They have been huge supporters and guides of our work to reimagine school. We see ourselves as on a journey. We are not there yet, but we are thrilled about the path that we are on and really grateful to have both of you here tonight. So welcome, Bruce and Will. With the chance to have you here this evening in this room, we wanted to start by just sort of opening it up to both of you. If you could talk a little bit about your work at Modern Learners and Change School and what you're excited about in your work with educating schools.
Thanks a lot, John. I'm going to actually start. It's great to be with you on your inaugural edition of this discussion via Zoom in your community, and it's great work that you're doing. We're real fans of the work that is happening in your district, and we're happy to be along for the ride on your journey. So just briefly, our work is really about trying to, and it was great to hear Marianne talk about learning so much, because that really is what our work is about. We like to say that we're trying to put the focus in schools back on learning instead of on testing or on grades or on college or on career or whatever else. Those things may have some importance, obviously, in the current iteration of schools, but we really think it all starts with learning, and we feel like schools have gotten away from that. And at this moment in time, especially with the way the world is changing so quickly, demands that we refocus our efforts on helping kids become powerful learners in their lives and who are able to thrive in a moment of a very rapid change and disruptive change that's happening. We feel like learning is a natural event in our lives, and what we're trying to figure out is how do we make it more natural, a more natural occurrence inside what is an unnatural construct of schooling. And I think that the interesting thing to us is that we all have a sense of what it takes to do really powerful learning. We all know as learners the types of conditions and contexts that are required for that to happen. We know that it involves passion, it involves freedom, it involves doing real work for real purposes. It's not constrained by time, all of those types of things. So what we're trying to do is through things like Change School and through our work at modernlearners.com, you can see all the other things that we're trying to make happen in the world right now. But we think that basically our work is to help schools contextualize the world and to really start and continue to have deep conversations around learning, and to see kids and teachers and everyone in the school community as learners, to create those cultures that really support that. And it's been our privilege, actually, over the last 6 or 7 years to be able to do that with schools around the world and with lots of different teachers and leaders who come at this work from many different angles, but I think are all feeling the challenge of the moment when it comes to, again, the way the world looks and the potentials that we have to connect, create, communicate, and learn at very deep levels on our own. So I think Bruce is going to talk a little bit about some of that work at a little bit more depth, and then, if I'm not mistaken, we'll be around to answer a few questions as well. So Bruce?
Thanks very much, Will, and thanks very much, John and Marianne. It's a real privilege to be able to, as you said, join you in this first year digital conversations. As Will said, we've had the pleasure in the last 5 or so years in working with schools, and in the last 2 years working through Change School with schools around the world. And we think this is a moment in time where we are seeing very significant change, that there's an awareness not only of change because of what's happening in the world around us, but also change because that world around us that's shifting has implications for what we do in school. And that the need for that change is somewhat urgent, because in many ways I think schools, we believe, have probably hung on to a traditional model which served us very well through the past century maybe. But currently we're, I think, all on a journey to try and search for new models, and as this title of this discussion is, to reimagine what school could and should be. And finding that balance between an urgency and the need to do it at depth that can be sustained, that it isn't just seen as the latest fad or the latest idea, is the real challenge everyone faces. It's a fine line between saying we have to get on and do this work and also understanding that this work takes a long time. So our work is rooted very much in the basics around learning, around understanding the modern context and the implications that has for us in schools, and also understanding what that then makes possible when we have access to the sorts of tools and technologies that are available to us, and understanding the shift that they're necessary is required in practice within schools, and also understanding that to do that we have to test many of the assumptions we've made about school that were probably accepted in the past. So it's a long process. It's not something that can be done in 3 to 6 months. It's something that's more like 3 to 6 years. It's something that does take commitment from not only leadership, but from all members of the understanding. I know that John and Marianne have certainly led some extraordinary activities and resources developing through Nipmuc in the work that they've been doing and in leading those conversations. And I think in schools that we've worked with, and we've worked, as Will said, between us, we've worked in over 50 countries with many, many schools. There are some consistencies that you can see. And to many people, some of those consistencies that are making a difference are not sparkingly innovative. They're not in any way very different to what you might expect, because it's common sense for us to start thinking about what makes sense in today's world and how can we think about learning in this world in ways that make sense to our young people and their futures. And that's the work that we've been focused on. We've been working with schools in helping develop their mission and their vision, and helping them craft that mission and vision so that it guides their work in the years to come. And it's been interesting because in the process, both Will and I and our colleagues, Lynn, Missy and others who work with us within the organisation, have also learned as much as we think people we've been working with have. We see different examples in different places of light for people now, and vision statements that are guiding people on how they can reach that mission. And that's the work, I think, that takes the time, because there has to be some shared understanding of that across the whole community. So it's been a great journey for us, and it's been an absolute pleasure so far to be working with John and Marianne up in Nipmuc and the team up there. And again, it's a pleasure to be able to talk with you again tonight.
That's great. Thank you, Will and Bruce. We can't thank you again enough for being here. And I will tell you that so much of the work that we're doing in Mendon Upton, and specifically at Nipmuc, has been guided by some of the thought-provoking questions that you've put out there for us. I know that it, requires us to continuously rethink and put questions out to our community too that aren't easy ones. It wasn't easy coming up with some of our guiding documents, but they were great conversations. Just so that everyone's on the same page, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little chat feature. If you click on that, it opens up a chat box on the right-hand side. So anytime throughout, I'm going to give it to Dave Quinn in a second to ask a question, but you can pose a question in the chat feature, and then we'll kind of kick it to you next if you're interested in asking that. So feel free to put comments in that box or questions that you have. I'm going to pass it over to Dave Quinn, who's Director of Technology Integration here at Mendon Upton, who had a question.
Hey, Bruce. Hey, Will. How are you doing tonight?
Good, mate.
Good to see you both again. Well, I think most of my reading from the previous 2 years before I got to Mendon Upton came through your blog and your recommendations. And what I found is that that you're raising an important question about reimagining school at a really critical time, and that this is a question that's kind of plagued education throughout the years. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your work with schools and your work in the research about what separates schools that have been able to make these changes and make them sustainable versus those who kind of hit the common pitfalls when the energy starts to wane a little bit.
Well, let me echo what Bruce said first of all, and that it's a long-term process and it's a very difficult one. I mean, it's we sometimes, it's not even a joke, but we say it's maybe the most difficult work you'll ever do in schools, to try to really reimagine what you're doing in classrooms, because traditional schooling has a very deep narrative in our society and our lives, and it's something that's just difficult to change. But we actually, and maybe Bruce, as I'm talking, or someone can put a link in there, but we actually wrote a white paper called The 10 Principles for Schools of Modern Learning, where we synthesized what we thought the characteristics were of the schools who were able to get further down this path and continue down the path. The very first thing was that they all had a very clear articulation of what they believed learning was and how it happened. It's stunning to me how many schools I walk into when I ask people what is learning, they really don't have an answer. And if they do have an answer, it's not a coherent one across the school community. And if you kind of wind that back and think about the implications of that, they're huge. School becomes a very inconsistent thing. It also becomes something that we don't really know then what we're assessing. If we don't have a definition of learning, how do we know that our assessments are actually measuring what kids are learning? And all sorts of other implications as well. But I think that along with that, a very clear mission and vision that people at least understand, and they may not all agree with it 100% at the outset, and maybe even down, as they go, as they work toward it. But at least everyone knows the direction that the work is heading. And then it's just a combination of a lot of cultural things where people see themselves as learners, where there are the power relationships that we have in schools are more flat, so that kids and teachers are co-creating things in the classroom. They're learning with one another, not necessarily one from the other. There's a lot of transparency in the work. There's a lot of willingness to experiment and to innovate and to fail. And I think that the final part of it is that everyone kind of understands that the work will never be done, that change is going to be constant from here on out, that we're going to have to constantly revisit the vision, the mission, the work, the practice, all of that. But that's a kind of an inquiry-based culture that is embraced, not kind of feared or not really dealt with, if you know what I'm saying. So there are lots of schools that are able to push through that initial kind of pushback, and there's always pushback when change is talked about or enacted. But I think that those things that I just mentioned are the fundamental kind of the foundational things that make the work continue to move forward.
One of the questions that I ask a lot when I'm working with students and parents is to think about their most powerful moments of learning, to think back to their experiences in school, what really stands out, and then also to think a little bit about, for parents, what they want for their students. And I think we're at this time, and Bruce, you mentioned it, we're at a turning point where we're looking to redefine success. Can you talk a little bit about why you think schools define their success in terms of achievement, SAT scores, MCAS scores, AP tests, and why that presents a challenge in kind of reimagining our work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for the first point you highlighted there, of course, is the understanding of what we mean by those terms and the need for shared language. And as you said, whether it's words such as success or achievement, it's very hard when people are talking about very different meanings for the words. And unfortunately, much of our reliance on those sorts of measures, those sorts of metrics, is historical. There's never been really a lot of thought, I think, given to the reasons behind it. And a lot of people have been influenced by those outside of school who seek to sort of bring accountabilities onto schools that bear no relationship to what learning is all about. And so what we've seen is a sort of whole industry has grown up outside of schools. I'm talking about the tutoring, testing and textbook companies that have benefited from these measures, and they've imposed this through government policy, and many come from a country fair, but in Australia as well as New Zealand and all around the world, Canada, have all been influenced by these metrics, and it's built a shallowness to the processes that are happening in schools. We produced another white paper which originally was called "How to End the War on Learning," and in many ways the sort of high stakes testings that we see across so many schools and so many districts and countries are just that. They actually inhibit or handicap the learning, the potential for learning for young people, because the focus becomes to the tests. And in many ways, people have just accepted that's been a reasonable measure. And when you see that those measures then are being used to measure the performance of teachers and of schools, it reaches a level of absurdity. But it's not good enough for us just to criticise what's available. What's more important is that we have alternatives available, and whether it's going through the depths of things like exhibitions and performance and narratives and a whole lot of other options. It's important that we as educators don't make the assumption that we don't have a responsibility to communicate students' progress and experiences to their parents and to keep a record for students themselves. And there are many, many ways now that this is possible, and many schools are actually embarking on this. And to the end of that, there is also alternatives now happening towards the end of school, end of secondary schooling, end of K-12, moving into the higher education sector, because a number of people would say the other motivation for us for having those measures is that it literally filters out those who are a rationing mechanism. And it's fortunate when now seeing movements and groups of schools that and will determine whether or not a child will get a place in college. So in many ways, there have been a whole lot of forces in place, and they've focused attention on the tests rather than on the child's learning. And I think people, Mastery Consortium and other examples are now an example of a shift. Was that I think that the other problem we have is the isolation of people moving and change. And this is one of the powerful things you're doing tonight, because you're bringing people together to share experiences in a very personal way through Zoom. Whereas before we had rules for many, many years, but leaders who are taking that challenge up have been isolated. They've often felt that they haven't been able to share their experiences, their successes, and most importantly, their challenges and failures. And what we're seeing now is through technology such as Zoom and others, leaders are able to share those experiences, and I think it's given them strength for the momentum that we're now seeing, both across the broader brush of change, but also across areas looking for alternatives in assessment.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Will. And we appreciate that, your insights. I've a lot more questions for you, but I also want to be sure that we give everyone else the chance to engage in some small group discussion and start to talk a little bit about these ideas. Mrs. Moran right now is setting up some breakout rooms for us, and we'd like to Did I say Mrs. Moran was sending us to breakout rooms? I think she sent me a little early. Okay. So what we're going to do is give you a chance to talk about questions you have and reactions to this new version of school that moves away from the idea of achievement as the only metric of success, that is driven by beliefs, that articulates a clear vision of how it's going to create learning experiences that provide inquiry and connections to the real world. It's a chance to explore. We don't expect people to have all the answers tonight, but to sort of bounce some of their reactions and questions off of each other. Mrs. Moran, you want to talk about how the Zoom rooms work?
Great. So I have the ability to set up rooms in the background. So I'm going to do 2 rooms. There's still going to be quite a few people in each room. So there'll be about 10, 11 people in each room. So in a minute, I'm going to send you there. So it'll come open to another room. And in about 5 minutes, I'll let conversation happen. And then I'll pull you back together. So once you're in those rooms, you can just start posing questions, start conversation, share your thoughts, with a smaller group of people, which I think will be helpful.
Great. Thank you. We are ready to go. So just go ahead and join the breakout room that pops up on your screen. You just hit join breakout room and you'll head out right now. and hopefully you enjoyed the conversations in the smaller group. We thought maybe because we are coming up on 7:45, maybe we could hear 2 or 3 sort of key ideas that came out of your small group conversations before we get ready to wrap up for the night. Who's the brave soul who's going to kick it off for us? Just remember to unmute whenever you get started.
Unmute yourself and go for it.
If anybody else isn't gonna do it, I guess I'll kick it off. Something that came up out of a question that I asked in our group might not even be that major, but I was asking about how right now we do kind of see that SAT score and that GPA kind of defining that student in some areas. And my question was that how would a student like me or just any other average student be able to distinguish themselves outside of the classroom and outside of just their GPA and their SAT score? And some of the suggestions that came up were things like internships, taking leadership roles, going to stuff like I did, like panels before school started, contributing and showing people those leadership roles. That will kind of give other people a scope of your personality and what you can do outside of the classroom. So I thought that was just a very awesome thing that came up from our small group.
Awesome, Ethan. Thank you so much. Maybe one more thought from the other group.
There's just too many educators in the room, so we all have really good wait time.
Great wait time.
It was basically the Nipmuc Love Fest. I think if I had to summarize what I was hearing is that there's a lot of really positive things going on at Nipmuc and across the district. And then Maureen had asked a really thought-provoking question about, where do we go from here and what's needed, and how do we continue to push that envelope. So I think kind of going back to Will's point that we're always going to be in this constant cycle of inquiry, and no matter what it is we're doing, we can always think about what the next step, the next iteration would be.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. We sort of a theme in our room was that there are no really clear answers to this, and that I think this is really tough work. And having people together to share these conversations is really helpful for us, because I think the more we talk about the challenge that we face, the better we're able to identify opportunities to move forward. As we get ready to wrap up, Mrs. Moran was going to talk to you briefly about what we call the Nipmuc roadmap and some of the work that we've been doing.
So an important part of the work we're doing is kind of capturing a journey. We do talk about it as a journey because we don't see it as work that started at the beginning of last year and we have a 3-year plan that it's going to end. It's Will and Bruce use a term called perpetual beta, which is one of my favorite terms, this kind of sense of always iterating, always finding the way. The world outside of our schools isn't ever going to stop changing. So I think it's important that as schools and as organizations of learning, we need to continue to change and iterate as well. So we use a tool called Tutori, but our Nipmuc roadmap is out there. And it's kind of just capturing the pieces. We add to it on a regular basis because we're continuously adding pieces. But John and I were just going to go through a couple things that we're doing this year, share them with you, but it's a place that you can go back to as well.
So Marianne, I'll just hit the first 3, then you can hit the ones after that.
That's great.
So just to check out, give you more information about the work we're trying, and then also get feedback on it, because we're always looking to grow and change. We have our lead learner meetings. Our lead learner meetings are our reimagined department chair meetings, where we used to hold monthly meetings with the small group of teacher leaders that make decisions that impacted the entire school. We now hold those meetings monthly, and they're open to all teachers and all students. So monthly we hold a workshop where we talk about reimagining school together. Exciting way to hear everybody's voices and kind of flatten the hierarchy of the school's leadership structure. We host our Food for Thought lunches, which are held twice per month, which students meet with a small group of teachers to provide feedback on a set number of questions. Last year we heard from more than 200 of our students giving us feedback about how to make school awesome, what to keep, what to change, and really challenging our thinking. We take all the feedback from those Food for Thought lunches, drop them into word clouds, and get really crystal clear images of the themes that pop up from our student feedback. We're developing a group of community partnership projects. It's examples of real work that has relevance beyond the classroom. So hopeful that by March, we will have a bank of about 20 examples of community partnerships with nonprofits, professional organizations. They're examples of interdisciplinary learning projects that help bring learning to life by connecting our kids directly to the real world. Marianne, iCubed?
Sure, iCubed, and we talked about this a little bit in our breakout room, is Interest, Inquiry, and Innovations in Learning. It's kind of our exploration of interdisciplinary learning where we have 3 teachers paired together along with our career community and innovations coordinator, so an English, a history, and a science teacher. And they also partner with an art teacher to make learning meaningful for kids and allow them to connect it to their passions. So rather than teaching them a set of standards, they're connecting the standards to their work. This spring we do Shadow a Student is something we do every year. Last year we had over 15 educators take part in it, and this year again we have more than that signed up, where we become a student for the day. We get into their shoes and learn about their perspective, and we think that shadowing them is one of the best ways to do that. We're excited again, we just held a brainstorming for our next 21st Century Learning Conference, which is being held on January 23rd. And this is our 4th year of kicking off those conferences. So there are days where we throw away the schedule, bring in professionals, and allow students to choose their learning for the day. So engaging in hour, half day, or full day sessions and work that matters to them.
And maybe Dave could take MERSDA leads conversations.
Great.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, John, for giving the plug. So we host a monthly interview series with education authors who we feel reflect the direction that we're trying to go in as a district. I know we've got some educators in the room. We're always looking for panelists to first read along with us and then participate in the interview. Our upcoming interview is with Ira Sokol, Pam Moran, and Chad Ratliff of the Albemarle Public School District in Virginia. What we love about this district is, and I'm sure that Will and Bruce would echo this, is that they really live the mission that we're trying to achieve. And personally, I see them as kind of a role model for what's possible in schools. So we'll be talking with them about their book, Timeless Learning, on December 6th from 7 to 8 p.m. The interviews are live on YouTube. And then we also post recordings on our channel as well, so you can look at some of our previous editions as well.
Thank you, Dave. We share that out just so people have a sense of kind of the work that we're undertaking and to get your feedback. We don't feel like we have the answers, but we feel like we're doing some really exciting exploration. And these ideas have come about through feedback, through conversations with kids and teachers and parents and community members. So we'd love to hear from you in the future, and we'd love to partner with you if you're interested in participating in any of those events. But most of all, we're thankful that you were here tonight. This is a big conversation that requires community buy-in, community feedback, and community enhancements to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. We can't thank you enough for giving up time, whether you were having dinner like Emily was, or sitting like Macy and Kim were side by side, or like Dave in his bunker down there by the by the furnace. You all carved out time, and it means the world for us tonight. So thank you so much. Marianne, any closing thoughts?
No, I just appreciate everyone being here and hopes that you'll continue to have these conversations. Obviously, it's not a journey that John and I are on solely. It's a district journey, but it's a community journey as well. So we're really excited that you're part of that with us.